right, everybody. My name is McKinley McQuiston, and thank you for joining us today for a UMA webinar with Stephen Smith from Applicant Pro. Some of you might have been following us since our first webinar, which was probably like, oh my gosh, probably 6 weeks ago, I think, but we've made it all the way through the first 5 steps. Now we're on our last one. It's going to be really great. We're going to do questions at the end if you have any, and we will also be posting this video on Friday for any of you that want to go back and watch it. But Steve, if you're ready to take it from here, it's all yours.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind on Friday, once you get the video, you can also share it with friends. And so if you have other folks in the HR world, hiring managers, etc., please consider sharing it. So yes, here we are again. This is actually our last webinar. This has been a series of 4 webinars specifically designed for the UMA and specifically manufacturing companies. And we're going to talk a little bit about that in depth today because some of the data that I'm going to share today is actually specific to this industry. So I'm really excited to talk about this. So as a reminder, thank you. Thank you from Applicant Pro. Thank you to the UMA for having these hosted and putting them on. We're excited. Just to let you know, so for those of you who are attending for the first time, my name is Steve Smith. I am actually a chief hiring expert here at Applicant Pro. We have about 10,000 companies that we work with. About 300 employees. We've been on the Inc. 5000 list about 10 years in a row now. We're really big on hiring. This is a little bit about me. I am SHRM CP and PHR certified. And I actually had somebody message me on LinkedIn from this webinar, I think 2 weeks ago. They're like, hey, what does the SHRM CP and PHR stand for? So I thought I'd just address that really quickly. So the SHRM CP is the Society for Human Resource Management. And the HRCI is the one who does the PHR, which stands for Professional Human Resources. These are basically certifications similar to what a CPA would be to an accountant. And so these are certifications you can either get with SHRM or you can get with the HRCI, which is the Human Resource Certification Institute. It's a 4-hour exam. You do have to study for it for about 6 months. When you take the exam, they open the exam window every 6 months or so. So that's what it is. And so when you see the SHRM CP and PHR certification, that's what it's about. So I've been doing this for about 17 years. Work with thousands of companies. I'm actually the SHRM state director here in Utah. We have 2,600 volunteers and members of the organization that we work with. And I am soon to be the author of the hiring tree, laws of applicant attraction. So a lot of the material that we've been covering over the past 4 sessions now are actually also found in my book. So for those of you that like Instagram and like to follow stuff like that, you're welcome to kind of scan that QR code and you can follow there. I'm hoping for a release time sometime in December or January. The editor just sent me the edited copy yesterday, and so I'm excited. We're going to get that going. And hopefully, like I said, we'll get to the publishing phase here towards the end of the year. So without further ado, let us pick up where we left off. So today, you're actually going to get kind of a bonus today. So I had McKinley title this, becoming an HR ghostbuster on purpose, because not only are we going to talk about optimization practices, but when I basically speak across the country, I visit a lot of places. I was in Pennsylvania and Michigan, several places where there's a lot of manufacturing going on. And it's interesting to get feedback. And one of the biggest things that some of the manufacturing organizations have dealt with are ghosting issues, ghosting and quiet quitting and things like that. We're going to define those a little bit later on. And so the cool part about this presentation today is I kind of added the ghosting and stuff towards the end because I thought it's an important topic to cover just because it's important to understand how to mitigate it if you can. So it'll be a little bit of a bonus today. So first, we're going to talk about this concept of search engines and aggregators. Because today, traditional job boards are not what they used to be. Really today, most job boards are either a search engine or an aggregator. And that's important to understand because when you're posting your positions and you're using these particular boards for your positions, if you don't know how to use those boards effectively, it makes it very difficult. In my book, This is actually one of the branches of the hiring tree, right? And so in order to effectively feed the branch the right nutrients to produce the fruit you want, which are obviously your applicants, you have to make sure that you understand how to actually use it. And so today we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, this is a great question to ask. I think we've done this on previous webinars. How many of you, and we probably should have developed a poll, McKinley. I completely forgot about this. But how many of you right now are just simply using your job description as your job ad? That is a huge mistake. And I've talked about this before because a job description is not search engine friendly. And let me say that again. A job description is not search engine friendly. Well, Steve, why does that matter? Well, think about it. Indeed is probably the #1 job board in the world, right? In the country, especially. However, is it a job board? Now, it's kind of a trick question because technically it is. It's the #1 job board in the country. However, at its core, Indeed is actually a search engine. Google Jobs is an aggregator. ZipRecruiter is a search engine. Glassdoor search engine. They're owned by Indeed now. Even LinkedIn and Facebook in their own rights have search engine technology kind of in the background that determines how an applicant goes to the site to actually search for open positions. The reason that's important to understand is because if we go back to your job description idea, a job description is never search engine friendly. It's just a bunch of bullet points and things like that. And one of the things you need to know is that one of the biggest changes that have occurred in the last 2 years is AI technology, which stands for artificial intelligence, and search engine optimization technology, where they use this algorithm to basically rank your position and grade it to determine if your position is worthy to be on their board. That's important to understand because, yeah, I can go to Indeed and I can throw money at things. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have probably spent a lot of money this year to try to boost your ads, if you will. However, the tips we're going to talk about today can actually boost your ads without spending any more money. And not only will they boost your ads, but we have proven that some of these elements we're going to talk about today have boosted ads by anywhere between 200 to 300% increase in applicant flow. So these are some important principles and concepts we're going to talk about today. So what's a search engine? This is important to understand how this works. There are 3 elements or 3 steps to the search engine. You first have the applicant does the search, and then you have what we call the impression stage. So this is the impression. The impression is basically the list of positions. It just shows the list of positions. The reason it's called an impression is because your ad has to impress the algorithm so that the algorithm will determine your ranking, which determines whether or not you appear to the top. Now, it's kind of funny because we talked about this, I think it was in the first webinar that we did in this whole series almost 2 months ago. When you're trying to impress an algorithm, the key to understand is that you can't just automatically pop to the top just because. There's this common fallacy in HR, and in fact, managers will do this a lot, and especially in the manufacturing world, they'll be like, "Hey, go take that job down and post it again, or go and refresh the job, go refresh it." The problem is that stems from the old days of Craigslist, where you would post a job, take it down after a week, and repost it so it'd go back up to the top, because that's how Craigslist work. It showed you the most recent position. However, if you do a search on Indeed today, or any job board for that matter, it doesn't matter. See, this one says active 5 days ago. If I were to show you the rest of this list, there would be some that say 30 plus days, 8 days, 7, 15, 22. Like, there would just kind of be a variety of days, if you will. There's no order to it. So the old days of Craigslist of, you refresh your job is gone. That's not how it works. If you want to refresh your job or push it to the top, which is really what you're saying, when a manager comes to you, or when somebody comes to you and says, "I want to refresh my job," what they're asking you really to do is, we want to be in the top of the search results. So when candidates are doing searches, we're the first ones to appear. That's not easily done, but we're going to talk about how to do it. So this is the first stage. This is the impress stage, the impression. It'll show the jobs. From here, an applicant will click, and then they'll get the option to apply. So those are your 3 steps: the impression, the actual click and then the option to apply. Okay. Now, in previous webinars, we've already talked about the apply. If you want to convert people to apply more often, then look at the previous webinars, because we talked about the content and things that should be inside of your job ad to attract the applicant and get them to want to just click that apply button. That's important. Okay. So don't forget that part of it. But if we want to appear more often in the search results, we have to follow search engine optimization practices so that when the algorithm is ranking and grading our position, it is ranking it well enough for the keywords that we want to be searched for, so that we can actually appear at the top more often and therefore receive more applicants. Okay, so that's important to understand. So let's talk about this. All of you want to know the secret sauce, right? Well, here it goes. First and foremost, this is probably the most important element of all, your target keyword. Now, the keyword typically is your ad title. So in this case, in this search, it was a registered nurse. That was my ad title. Therefore, that becomes my keyword as well. So your ad title or keyword needs to appear in the body of the ad 1 to 2% of the time. What does that mean? Well, if your ad is 300 words, 1% of 300 is 3. 2% is 6. That means in this scenario, the term registered nurse needs to appear at least 3 times and up to 6 times within the actual body or language of the ad itself. That is probably one of the most important aspects. The other aspect of that is you have to make sure that your keyword is searchable. Okay. So for example, at one point in my career, I've always been in the kind of the recruiting world, but at one point my title was a chief development advisor. Like I was a senior development advisor, career development advisor. Now, can you imagine if I go to Indeed right now and I actually look up career development advisor, what do you think I would find? I would actually find jobs that were for colleges, universities, or just in advising and consulting roles, which has nothing to do with recruiting, which is actually what I might have been looking for. That's important to understand, because one of the biggest mistakes that I see in the manufacturing world is that oftentimes they will put a title to the position that is really not relevant to what an applicant might search for. Let me say that again. The ad title that you're using and the keyword that you're targeting is not something an applicant is actually looking for. So sometimes you have to actually go back and go back to the manager, especially, and say, hey, manager, what is this applicant actually doing 90% of the time? In my book, I call it the 90% rule, where you have these conversations with your managers to say, look, I need to understand what people are doing in this role 90% of the time, because what you tell me will reveal some of the keywords that I need to start targeting in my ad. And the other cool part about this rule is you can target multiple keywords. You do not just have to solely target the actual job title. That's important to understand, because like my bank tellers and some of my credit union, credit unions, they oftentimes want to hire bank tellers. About 8 years ago, we actually did this test where we said, why don't we change it to a member service representative or a customer service representative? And they actually saw an increase of almost 800% in applicant flow. It was crazy, the difference, because now they were targeting a keyword that was more relevant to the searches an applicant was conducting in order to find them. And so, but at the same time, they were also able to target bank teller in their ad. You just follow the same rules. So if you want to target multiple keywords, then you can use that keyword 1 to 2% of the time throughout your ad. So for a lot of our credit union and banking clients, that's what they did. They put the title as customer service or member service representative. So that was kind of their chief target. But then they still use the terms bank teller and other elements they have to do in that industry within the ad. A lot of my manufacturing clients have like production, CNC machinists and other machinists. Think about those terms. How many keywords do you actually want to target in your ad? Okay. Think about if I was an applicant and I was doing a job search and you wanted that search to pop your position to the top, the common refresh, which is really what people are saying is I just want to appear at the top of the search results, then you need to make sure that you're using this keyword optimization appropriately. Now, there's a few things you don't want to do. One of the new rules, especially with Indeed, is you can't put what we call clickbait in the title of the ad. So what is clickbait? Clickbait is like bonus or the location or immediate opening or all these little symbols, like a cartoon character cursing or something like that. That is known as clickbait. So the new rule as of over the summer, is that when you post a job, the job title has to be what would simply be displayed on a business card. Think about that rule. Whatever is put on a business card is what I need to display. And so registered nurse makes sense in this case because that's what I'm looking for, right? You also want to be careful with acronyms. If you're going to use an acronym, then you want to make sure that you also type out the full keyword, because a lot of candidates don't always use the acronyms. They may not know the acronyms. They may not like the acronyms. For example, RN, which is common for registered nurse, is also a term used in engineering. And so when somebody looks for an RN, sometimes these RN candidates will find a lot of positions in engineering and they're like, wait a minute, that's not what I was looking for. And so then they'll switch and go to the actual full keyword and they'll just type in registered nurse and then have RN parentheses. So think about your roles. Think about the roles that you're trying to hire for and think about what kind of keywords do you actually want to target. If somebody is looking for that keyword, do I want them to find my job? If the answer is yes, then you want to follow this 1% to 2% rule and then make sure that in the body of your ad, you're putting it in 1% to 2% of the time. I cannot emphasize that enough. This is the #1 rule for search engine optimization. If you want to increase your visibility, appear at the top more often in search results, then this is what you need to do. Okay. And you want to avoid the clickbait stuff. Don't put immediate opening or bonus or schedules or anything else in the title. You can still put that in the body of the ad. If you want to talk about bonuses and other things, go ahead and put it in the body of the ad. That still makes it searchable. But just know that it's rare that an applicant would get to Indeed here and type in the word bonus and then wait to see what comes up. That's just not how candidates search. So you have to think about, how does a candidate conduct their search and what kind of keywords do I want to be relevant for so that I'm popping up to the top a lot more often. The cool part about that too is when you follow this rule, if you decide to sponsor your ad on Indeed, well, now you're sponsoring a much more effective job ad. And so you actually get more bang for your buck. You know how Indeed usually promises you a certain number of applicants if you do so? Well, guess what? That number actually increases when you follow these optimization rules. So just keep that in mind. Another thing that went into play about this was that content. If you recall in previous sessions, if you missed it, we talked about the top 3 things that applicants want to know in a job ad. Did you know that the search engine algorithms now are designed to not only rank your position, but one of the things that they're looking for is a concept called quality control. They want to make sure that your content of your job ad is quality. Content is king. It always has been in search engine optimization. And so that's why we talked about some of those other elements before in writing your job ad, because the content of your ad needs to be unique and needs to have the answers to the questions that applicants might have when they're conducting their job search. And what that does is that actually helps you in search engine optimization. So some of the elements we've already talked about will actually help you and aid you in this process. This is why it's so important that your ad be an actual ad and not just a job description, because guess what the algorithms do? When you just have a job description with a bunch of bullet points now, it catches all those bullet points. And guess what the algorithm does? It says, this ad is probably not quality content. It looks like it's just a job description. Therefore, we're going to de-rank it. And so the visibility of that ad will not show up as well because you haven't taken the time to actually write an ad, right? And so this is a change. This is a huge change that has occurred in the search engines because there was a huge influx of scam artists during COVID, tons of people pretending to be employers, posting fake jobs and things like that. And so the search engines basically had to say, look, we want to make sure that the content that we're providing a job seeker is quality content. And if we're going to do that, then we also need to make sure that the people that are posting jobs on our board are legitimate organizations, have quality content, are not just throwing up job descriptions. And so the algorithm now is going to rank you better if you follow some of the rules and concepts that we've already been talking about in these presentations. Ad rotation and radius is also helpful. So some of my manufacturing organizations that I work with, they have multiple locations. And sometimes these multiple locations are next door or they're near each other. And so the positions are the same, basically the same title, they're just at a different location. There's a new radius rule that if you're less than 25 miles from one of the other locations, you cannot use the same ad at the same time because the search engine will actually take one of them off and remove it altogether. So if you have ads like that right now where it's the same position and you're getting a whole bunch of applicants for one but not the other, and yet it's in the same city, that's probably why. So ad rotation is a way to get around that. What you do is you create a version A and a version B of the same position. And during one, for this location, we go ahead and use version A, for this location, version B. And then after 30 days, we rotate and we switch it. Now version B is over here, version A is over here. And then 30 days, we rotate again. So what happens is you have multiple ads that can actually help applicants kind of say, oh, this is different, right? And then the search engine also thinks it's different. Now, the other advantage of ad rotation is if you have the same ad, especially for your evergreen positions. So what's an evergreen position? An evergreen position is a position that we post all the time. It's just one that we're constantly hiring for no matter what, because of turnover or what have you, okay? It's known as an evergreen position. Ad rotation also helps with evergreen positions. So even if you don't fall under the radius rule, if you have an evergreen position, it is in your best interest to have anywhere between 2 to 3 versions of that ad, so that for 30 days, we post this version, for 30 days, that version, 30 days, version C, and then we rotate. The reason that's beneficial is because the algorithm sees it as different because the ads are written differently and it's visible to different applicants. In marketing, and I'm always going to say this, recruiting is marketing. In marketing, you have to try different ads sometimes to try to get people to click, right? To want to click and apply. The same thing goes for job seekers. They may read other ads that are very similar to yours or the same thing, or it's just another job description. And so they just kind of scroll past it. And so that's why the ad rotation can help. So when you have different ads that you're advertising every month or so, then that helps. And so usually I stick between 2 and 3. That should be sufficient for the ad rotation. It'll help a ton because I might react to one ad a certain way and laugh at it. Another person might read the same ad and cry. Another person might read the same ad and just they're indifferent to it. We all react differently to different ads. And so the other advantage of ad rotation is you can actually target multiple job seekers, which also increases diversity. So just kind of think about that. We've talked about the copycat rule. Don't be a copycat. Don't put the same wording every single time on every single ad and copy it, because guess what? The algorithms will de-rank you now for that. It is part of their quality control. If you just have the same paragraph every single time to start every single job, you're actually hurting yourself in the search engines now. Another thing is ban the box. So this is actually a new rule. This is effective as of about a month and a half ago. So did you know that if you, in your ad itself, if you say, we run a background check or a drug screen or something to that, we run a check like this in your job ad, the algorithm actually blocks your ad or it deranks it so much that you get absolutely no visibility now. That's important to understand. Now, this was a result of the ban the box legislation, which has swept the country. I don't think Utah quite has this in place just yet. They should, because it's a really important rule. But because of it, the Indeed, ZipRecruiter, they've already changed their algorithms. So if in your ad you say we run a background check or you have to pass a background check or whatever, you're going to want to remove that wording now, because that wording is actually hurting your ranking. And that's important to understand. Now, it doesn't mean you can't run a background check. You can still run background checks on applicants as part of your process, right? But in your job ads, you want to remove that. Okay, so just kind of keep that in mind. Another thing is pay transparency. If you are not including pay in your job ads, the algorithms are deranking you. And when I say deranking, they're making you less visible. It is a new rule due to pay transparency laws. Colorado was one of the first ones to pass this into law. New York is about to, Washington State, Oregon. There are several others that are about to pass this into law. If you don't include pay, you actually get fined by the government now. So it's not quite here in the state of Utah, but you need to understand that just because it's not a law doesn't mean the algorithms haven't changed. So as of July 1st, one of the official changes in the algorithms, especially on Indeed and LinkedIn, is that if you do not include pay in the body of your job ads, they actually derank your position. They will not display you as much. And the new thing they've added is a guesstimation. They will actually guess what your what it is, like what your pay might be. And so you'll start getting a lot of applicants that apply and they're like, well, wait a minute, your ad says that you pay such and such, and they'll even pull it up and show you the guesstimate. And I've seen this many times where the applicant actually shows you what it says you pay. And that's because Indeed and LinkedIn especially are now guessing for you. If you don't include pay, they will guess for you, because for them, it's part of their new rule. That's important to understand. This is a brand new rule. It just went into effect in the last several months. And it's important that going forward that you include pay in your job ads, because if you don't, you are going to lose out on some solid applicants. Plus, one of the biggest pushbacks I get from this, I have a lot of applicants that are CEOs, CFOs, like they'll say, well, we never include pay. That's, we just don't do that. We don't want the competitors to see. Well, the reality is the competitors already know, okay, because everything's out there anyway. And two, when you don't include pay, you're actually hurting yourself, because many applicants in fact, right now, a recent survey, 9 out of 10 applicants will scroll past jobs that don't list pay. So they'll just scroll right past them. They won't even click on them anymore. It's just the market right now. That fluctuates. So I've seen it as low as 6 out of 10. But right now it's about 9 out of 10. And so they're going to scroll past you anyway when you don't include pay. So just kind of keep that in mind, because these are really, really important aspects. So there are probably going to be more rules and new things that come out all the time. This is why I do what I do. We pay attention to these rules. We have a direct, Applicant Pro actually has a direct relationship with Indeed. And when these new rules come out, not only do we force and help our clients to follow the new rules, but we also educate and make sure that these new rules are followed so that they can actually increase applicant flow. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, we have a few minutes to talk about this fun topic. And this is really important topic, because how many of you are dealing with this right now? How many of you have applicants who are just not showing up? They're not showing up for the interview. They're not showing up for day one on the job. Like it's just happening. It's rampant right now. One of the biggest mistakes that I see is what we call the blame game. So whose fault is it that applicants aren't showing up? Whose fault is it? The reality is it's more our fault, the employer's fault, than we realize. And it's important to understand that, because if there are elements of ghosting that we can change as an organization, then we should do it. We have the power to make those changes. So what are some of those changes? I'm going to tell you. So one of the first things to know is your application process. Now, we covered this in previous webinars, so you can go back and watch the webinars. If your applicant process, actual application is not mobile friendly, is longer than 3 minutes, and does not use easy apply integrations, that is the number one reason why people are ghosting you right now. Because what happens is they apply for your job, they apply for a bunch of other companies that was way easier. And when you call and start scheduling appointments, the applicant thinks back and says, oh, I remember that one. That application was so crazy. And so guess what they do? They just decide, I'm not going to go to that one. What's the point? There's no reason for it. It was so hard to apply in the first place. I can only imagine what the rest of the process might be like. So it's important to understand. So is your application process itself actually scaring applicants away? That's really, really important. Now let's talk about the interview process. This is probably the number one place where employers are losing out on applicants and where ghosting is occurring. And in fact, it is upwards of 28% right now. It's the highest that I've ever seen it. And this is the third recession that I've been in. And in fact, I just saw a question come in from Daryl. What about ghosting in interviews? We're going to talk about that. Okay. So here's the thing. A lot of you probably do phone screens, as you just said, right? But how is that phone screen going? Because oftentimes in the phone screen, we're so much about either finding out about the applicant, making sure they meet minimum criteria, or just giving them a brief snapshot of the organization, that we forget that this phone interview is the first opportunity that this applicant has to learn about who you are as an organization, who the manager is that they might be working with, and what your organization is all about. And so what are we actually addressing in that phone interview that is scaring them off? So let's talk about some of these elements. I'm going to throw a few words here on the screen, because what we have found is that in many of the phone screens, so we actually started looking a lot of phone screens and recording them and listening to them and kind of listening in on what is it that the applicants are hearing and going through during these phone screens and even face-to-face interviews, but a lot of these phone screens. And these are the things that it seems like the companies want to talk about. They want to talk about the paycheck and the satisfaction of working for the boss, annual reviews, weaknesses that they might have, and maybe the job itself. But in a Gallup poll recently, they revealed that especially this younger generation, these are things that they don't want to talk about. And if you talk about these things in the phone interviews, you're actually missing out on some really good opportunities. Here's what they want to talk about. They want to know their purpose. It's not just about how much you're willing to pay them. They want to know, what is the impact that this position will have on the organization as a whole? If I'm going to come work for you in this position, what is that impact? What does that impact look like? And so one of the things you have to ask yourself in the phone screen, am I helping them understand the purpose of this position I'm trying to hire them for? Do they understand that purpose? Can they see themselves fulfilling that purpose? This is important. The second thing is development. A lot of applicants want to know how they will develop during the process. It's not just about being satisfied in their work. It's about, what is it that your organization is going to provide me by way of career development or personal development, the training, what kind of things are you doing to help me develop who I am as an individual? Are we talking about this in the interviews or on the phone screens? Are we addressing that? Okay, another thing is coach. They don't just want a boss anymore. Nobody wants a boss anymore. They want a coach. What is it? Think about, for those of you that have ever played in a sport, think about your most favorite coach and what was it about that coach that you love the most? Just think about that for just a moment. A lot of individuals and applicants are looking for this because 70% of the people that leave their workforce, do you know they leave because of their immediate supervisor or manager? Because that supervisor or manager is not acting like a coach. They're either acting too much like a friend, right? Which can happen, or they're just acting like a jerk, period. They're not acting like a coach. Part of development is helping them not only see themselves in the role, but here, let's talk about how we can make it better. Let's talk about how you can increase your skills and qualifications and get more trainings and things like that. So this is extremely important, okay? Ongoing conversations. It is not just about annual reviews or 6-month reviews. Applicants want ongoing conversations. One of the things you should talk about is, what kind of ongoing conversations do we have in the organization? Do we just do an annual review and see how you're doing in 6 months? Or is your direct manager or supervisor actually having ongoing conversations with you throughout to really help you understand, here's where we're at. Here's what you're doing well. This is great. Here's what we can improve upon. This is extremely important. This is what they want to know. The other thing is they want to know about their strengths. And are you going to use my strengths to help the organization in their growth? Too often, we are so focused on what they're weak at or what they're losing out on or what they're not doing correctly. And we focus on that so heavily that we forget about to tell them, here's what you're doing well. Here's what's going right. Here's what we love about what you're contributing to your purpose in the organization and in this role. Okay, so it's important to understand that. And then finally, their life. Let's be honest, guys. I work, right, too, but it's not my life. I have kids and everything at home. That's my real life, right? And so how are we accommodating for that? Are we accommodating, or do we expect them to work these 12-hour shifts 7 days a week? Are there other options we can do for flexibility? So one of the problems is during these phone screens and interviews, we are not talking about what is most important to them. And sometimes in the interviews, we heard a lot where they would just sit back and say, okay, well, do you have questions for us? That's not effective enough, because think about it, your interview, especially the phone screen, this is your opportunity as an employer to shine and to show how these things are important to you as an employer. And therefore, it can be an element of what they might be trying to escape from in their current work environment, right? So this is important. And so when another organization they have a phone screen with has talked about these things and we haven't, guess what happens? They ghost you because, oh, this one, they talked way better. I love this conversation with this manager, whoever it is I met with. I'm going there. You know, another thing we've seen is this right here. during the interview process, the manager or whoever is conducting the interview has been so buried in admin tasks and processes and doing this and doing that, that the candidates, almost 8 out of 10, will readily admit that, you know what, I didn't feel like they were really listening to me. I don't feel like they were really engaged, or that it almost sounded as if they had somebody else they were waiting on to get on the phone, or somebody came into their office and interrupted them. This is not only on the phone screens, but even in face-to-face interviews. There was so much interruption and all these other things that it sounded like they were doing or involved with, that, you know, I don't think they really had a vested interest in me. So why would I show up for the next date, if you will? You know, if we think about this like a dating process, that's like somebody going to the date and all you do is you kind of, you know, sit here on your phone while you're talking. Oh yeah, okay. And think about the interview process. Is my phone screen or my face-to-face interview a full focus and a fully engaged conversation with the actual applicant? So it's so important to understand. Now let's be honest, there are some applicants that are not fully engaged either. So those, you probably want them to ghost you. But for those applicants that you are truly interested in, what is it like for them in their shoes when they're actually listening and speaking with the managers? We talked about the blame game. There's some blame there. Bob Rossing it. So I talked about this on one of my LinkedIn posts. You need to Bob Ross it. Think about Bob Ross. One of the things Bob Ross was really good at doing was taking somebody who had no idea how to do art, and he would tell them to paint these happy little trees, right? And he would go through and he would teach you, and literally within a half hour, you could learn to paint little trees, happy little trees. And you could do it because he believed in you. He was willing to take the time to sit down and paint the picture so that you can understand the whole picture, right? The big picture of why, the who, what, why, where, all those things, and show you how to do it. Now think about your when you're in the interview process and even in the work environment. Are you Bob Rossing it? Are you being a Bob Ross, right? This is so important because your managers are your brand champions. They're the ones that are selling the brand. The people that are in the hiring process are the ones selling the idea of why that applicant should come work for you. And so you have to understand that. So the question is, are your managers fully vested? Now, the last one, this decision maker, sometimes managers don't always have the answers. And guess what happens when a candidate asks a question, the manager's like, you know what? I don't know the answer to that. I'll have to get back to you. And they never get back to them. What does that do, right? Think about this too. Sometimes they ask a question, oh, well, we'll have to find out. You know, that's not my decision. When the manager or the person in the interview process is not the decision maker and does not have the power, it really makes you come off wrong. Like when an applicant is talking with you and asks you some of these very important questions and the answers are not found, what are you doing? You're not answering the questions the applicant wants to know. And so they're more likely to ghost when they don't feel like that you really have all the answers. And so that's important to understand as well. So just think ahead of time of what are some of the answers and things that applicants want to know. So guys, this is it. This is all that we have for these sessions. I know we're a little bit over today, but like I said, I wanted to throw this idea of ghosting in here because it is such a hot topic. Now, after 4 weeks, or actually, I guess 8 weeks of all these sessions, what's the next step? Well, you could do it yourself, right? You can go out and take some of the elements we've talked about. You can just go do it. You could also do it with some help, or you could have somebody do it for you. And worst of all things, you could do nothing. I have worked with thousands of manufacturing companies in this country, talking about some of the elements that we've talked about today. And I can promise you that if you will put into practice some of these things, whether you choose to do it yourself, whether you get help from somebody like Applicant Pro, because we have 2 options of full service and recruitment marketing. I don't care how it gets done, but it needs to get done. And I can promise you, because I've seen this countless numbers of times, that you will increase your applicant flow by anywhere between 200 to 300%. I have seen that consistently over and over and over again for those organizations that actually take these things into practice and actually implement and put them into play. The reality is sometimes we don't always have time, right? I don't have time to write my job ads or make changes to them. I don't have time to do some of those marketing principles. These are great ideas, Steve, but I don't have time for stuff like that. Well, that's why somebody like me exists. This is why Applicant Pro exists. Sometimes you need help. You can't always do it on your own because you don't always know what you don't know. And so just know that Applicant Pro is here. We offer a 20% discount for UMA members and on all of our services, except background checks. That's the only thing I can't offer a discount on, but everything else we offer 20% discount, which is one of the highest discounts we've ever offered as an organization. So the question is, what will you do? What are you going to do to start putting these things into practice and actually making a change and making differences? So if you have any questions, if you would like to see some of the free tools that we have available, if you would like to schedule a call with me, just to do an ad review or a, hey, can you take a look at my job, Steve? Can you take a look at our process? Like, where are we missing the boat here? I'm willing to talk about it. Free review on me. You just scan that little QR code and you can schedule time with me. So I hope these 4 webinars have been really beneficial to you over the last 8 weeks. I am so passionate about hiring, and I'm so passionate about the things that we've talked about today, because I know they will make all the difference in your hiring process. They will make you better as an organization. They will make you better at attracting people, and they will make you better at really helping the applicants to understand why they should come work for you. And so thank you. Thank you so much for having me. UMA, thank you for doing these webinars and inviting me to come talk about some of these elements. This is kind of the end. We're not going to have any more webinars, at least, as of late. There's nothing coming up, but I'm sure we'll develop some additional ones that we can do in the future. But again, please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions, or you just want to have some one-on-one time with Steve and say, hey, here's my situation. Here's what's going on. What do you think? And we can take it from there. So we'll open it up for Q&A. I've seen a few questions come through, and I think most of those have been answered. But I do want to open it up for anybody else that might have some questions if you'd like to ask them now. So it's all you, McKinley.
Yep. Thank you so much, Steve. That was great. I really did learn a lot, and I'm not even hiring people, but I feel totally prepared to go into it now. But I don't think we have any new questions coming into the chat besides the ones I've already come in. So I think that might be it. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Yeah.
And if you've been with us through the whole series, thank you so much. If you're new today, thank you. Like I said, the video will be posted on our YouTube channel Friday. I will be sending you all an email in the morning too, for you to go and watch that video right away. And like Steve said, feel free to share it around, show everyone inside your company. But I think that's it for today. So thank you, Steve.
Awesome. Enjoy the holidays, guys. I know it's coming up. So enjoy holiday time with family and friends. And for those of you that are going to be at the UMA banquet on Saturday, I'll be there too. I'm really excited to dress up and see everyone. Yeah, we'll go from there. So thanks, everyone.